Welcome to Talking with Teachers, a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. We are delighted to be able to showcase for you every month some of the dedicated, outstanding professionals who make a difference every day in the lives of local children. It is my privilege to introduce the host and creator of Talking with Teachers, County Superintendent Bill Cirone.
I'm Bill Cirone, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I'm pleased to introduce my guest today, Carrie Padfield, a kindergarten teacher at the Solvang School in the Solvang School District. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, Carrie. And also, I know you were named the Teacher of the Year in Solvang School.
I was.
And also one of the finalists for the 2017 County Teacher of the Year. So double congratulations.
Thank you. It was quite an honor. Thank you.
Well, we're going to build off that and talk about your teaching and education in general today. But before we go there, let's trace the path that you took to Solvang and teaching, because it's all interrelated. So going back to the very beginning, where were you born, and tell us a little about growing up, your childhood, and where you went to school.
I was born in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina, a long ways from here. My dad was in the Navy, and so it really did kind of shape my growing up and the kinds of experiences I had. He was stationed overseas. And so my first schooling in kindergarten was actually in a school where they were speaking Spanish. My parents thought it would be a great idea to put me in a school so that I could learn another language. And it was a great idea, but I didn't think so at the time. It was really a tough experience when I was little. But I think it kind of helped shape the kind of teacher I am today and the understanding I have for kids who don't speak English and who are in a classroom where English is the language that we're using. I lived overseas until about, I think I was in second or third grade when we came back to the United States and lived for a short time in Phoenix. And then we moved to the Bay Area, where I went to school for the rest of the year, or my years in school. And after graduating high school from Petaluma, California, I went to university at University of San Diego and studied there.
So what did you study? What was your major?
My major is diversified liberal arts, which is an education major.
An education major. So when did you know that you wanted to be a teacher? What was the magnet that drew you in?
Gosh, you know, I can't remember not wanting to be a teacher. I think I've wanted to be a teacher since I was a kid, old enough to imagine what I wanted to be when I was grown up. I've always loved kind of working with kids and figuring them out and figuring out what makes them tick. So I think it's something that I've always wanted to do.
So how long have you been teaching?
This is my 23rd year.
23 years, wow.
Crazy, I know.
And,
It was a wow.
What was your first teaching job? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do remember. I think I can remember that. When I first was hired, I was hired to teach third grade, and I taught third grade for about 8 years in Petaluma, California, which is the district that I had grown up in for the most part. So it was kind of exciting to go back and be a teacher in the same district that I'd spent so many years as a student.
Were any of the teachers that taught you still there?
They were there, yep.
So that must have been a very different experience.
It was, and it was kind of exciting, and to see them as you know, equals. I'll never be able to see them as equals, but to see them in that regard was really kind of a cool thing.
So what was the path that you traveled to Solvang?
So I lived in Petaluma, where I first started teaching, and I taught there for about 10 years. And then my husband and I got pregnant and had twins. My parents had since moved to Solvang, and as much as I wanted to stay home and be a mom, I knew I had to get back to work. And so we came down here because my mom knew that she'd be able to help take care of the babies. So we moved down here right after they were born. Which was a huge leap of faith because we had brand new twins, and my husband quit his job and I quit my job, and we just kind of came down here hoping it would all work out, and it did. It was a great experience.
So did you start teaching kindergarten? Or?
I did. When I first got here, I really wanted to still have a few more months with my kids, and the school year hadn't started. So I went to Solvang School, which was the school closest to my parents' house, and said, I'd love to volunteer. Where can you put me? I can speak Spanish, and I just really like you to know who I am, so that next year when I'm looking for a job, I wasn't an unfamiliar face. And Jesse Leva was the principal at that time, and he sat down with me and said, we don't want you to volunteer, we want to hire you. We have a teacher going out on maternity leave. And I said, no, I still want to be home with my kids. But after many conversations with him, I ended up taking a long-term sub position in the district in 4th grade. So I did that for the end of the year, and then was hired at kindergarten the next year.
So you tell us about your class this year's class.
It's a great group of kids. I have so much fun with them. It's a big class. I have 25 kids, but they're terrific, and we're having a great year, learning lots.
So what is your teaching style?
You know, it's hard to pinpoint it. I really believe that kids have to feel comfortable in order to learn, and so I spend a lot of time working on my classroom environment and making sure kids feel safe to take risks, because I know that if they feel safe to take risks, that they're just going to learn, and that's what I see happening a lot. We do a whole lot of hands-on learning where kids are really engaged and having fun, and maybe don't always realize how much they're learning when it's happening.
So how would you describe your philosophy of education?
You know, my philosophy is that all kids can learn, and it's a matter of figuring out kind of what makes them tick and what buttons need to be pushed to make that learning actually happen. I've dealt with lots and lots of different kinds of kids, and probably the most fun I have is really figuring out each one of them and how they can, you know, be successful, because I think that they can and should feel that way.
And in terms of kindergarten, which you obviously love and have a passion for, what is it that you find so rewarding about teaching kindergarten?
It's absolutely amazing to me when these kids start on the first day of school, how many of them, you know, don't have even, you know, experience with writing or picking up a pencil, or even some of them having had books read to them. And to see the kind of progress that they make from September until June is amazing. And I don't think you see that kind of progress with other grades. Having taught 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and now K also, I can say that certainly in those grades, you don't see the kind of progress that you do in kindergarten from where they start to where they end. And putting those building blocks in place for them is really rewarding.
So if a listener were to drop by and visit your classroom, what kinds of things might they see?
They would probably hear a lot of things. It's probably a better question. What would they hear? It would be loud, because there's always a lot going on. I believe the kids need to be active, and they need to be doing and involved in activities. And I think that play is really still important in kindergarten as well. I think that a lot of learning happens in those times that people maybe sometimes forget. So kids would be active, they would be engaged, they would be thinking and discovering and all of those things that 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds should be doing.
You know, when you talk about that kind of engagement and hands-on learning that goes on in kindergarten, statewide, as you well know, we've moved to a new style of curriculum called the Common Core. Mm-hmm. Simply put, I think while I'm oversimplifying, basically, we've moved away from rote learning to more hands-on learning. It sounds like the old saying, you know, everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten.
It's all true.
Isn't that always been pretty much the kindergarten philosophy?
I believe it is, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that kindergarten that year is such an amazing time for kids, and the growth and what they accomplish and what sets them into motion then for the rest of their years in school is really important.
And so what do you see as your special strengths and special interests?
Well, I think I have, as a strength, kind of a way of seeing the room and really understanding what's going on at all times in all of those 25 little brains, and who needs what, and making sure that I get them what they need so that they make progress. And that doesn't necessarily mean just lows, it means highs too, and really looking at every child progressing and every child learning and making sure that, that every child feels successful. I'm also very passionate about the arts, and we do a lot of art in my classroom, be it art or music. There's lots of drama and opportunities for movement, because I think that those are really important too for children to learn.
In fact, there's an organization called SAM, Solvang Arts and Music.
There is.
And you've become very involved, have you not?
I have. I was the president for several years, so I'm a past president now, but still on the board, and I'm very involved in that group. And it's a tremendous organization that raises about $150,000 every year for Solvang School students. And we fund the programs that happen in terms of art, music, drama, and dance at Solvang School so that kids have those opportunities. And they're so important. I think that all of those classes are important in and of themselves. But as a teacher, I also feel like I probably wouldn't get the same results in my class if my kids didn't have those kinds of experiences. I think they're really important.
So make the case to our listeners. Pretend you're in their living room and you're asking for money. Why are the arts so very important in a well-balanced education?
I tell them that, first of all, their kids love these programs, and they really do. They're an opportunity. When I watch my kindergartners and they go into these classes and they're excited and they're doing and they're experiencing things that they may not have an opportunity to experience if were it not for Sam. And on top of that, there's been tons of research that shows the connection between the arts and actual learning, and I think that that's really important too.
You know, I mentioned earlier that you were named the Solvang Teacher of the Year. What did it feel like when you learned that you were to receive that honor?
It was a tremendous honor. It really was. What a privilege. I was actually really surprised, just because at that school I've been in lots of those teachers' classrooms and seen, you know, the kind of teaching and instruction and love that happens in those classrooms on behalf of the teachers. And so I was surprised to be picked, because there were lots of other teachers at Solvang School that I would have picked before me. But it was really a nice honor, one I think that a lot of teachers deserve to have, because it's you know, recognition that you don't always get, and it certainly feels nice. But we have so many teachers, not just at Solvang School, but at all schools, that work really hard and put in a tremendous amount of time for their students, and I think that they all deserve that same recognition.
Well, you represent all of those teachers very well.
Thank you.
You know, technology,
Yeah.
that certainly revolutionized the way teachers teach and students learn. However, kindergarten's pretty early for using it as a teaching tool, perhaps
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So tell me, I'll ask you that as a question, is kindergarten too young to begin exposing kids to an effective, responsible use of technology? And do you use technology in your classroom?
Yeah, and I think the key word there is responsible use, because I think it's absolutely appropriate for kindergartners to be involved with technology and to be on computers and iPads and that sort of thing, because it is the track that their learning is going to take. We're doing lots of things in the schools now using technology, so I would be remiss if I didn't provide them with those opportunities. But I think it's also important to remember that that kids learn in lots of different ways, and so we can't always just rely on technology. I think that oftentimes parents and sometimes even teachers think that that's a good way to kind of differentiate your instruction, because technology can provide opportunities for students to be learning at their own level. And that's a great thing, but I think it's also important to remember the human component of that, and that teachers need to be really involved and parents need to be really involved in that education process too. So in other words, not just plugging them in.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, when kids come to kindergarten, they're well familiar with technology. They're digital natives. They've been using it at home.
Most of them.
Yeah, most of them, correctly. But have you found as a kindergarten teacher that also affects attention span?
Well, I have certainly found a difference in attention span in my classroom. I'm not sure that I can tie it to that, but I know that there's research out there that says that that could be happening. That's one thing that I've noticed in 23 years, is that there seems to be an issue with attention with a lot of kids coming into classes these days. And you know, I would hesitate and say maybe it has something to do with being in a classroom and being asked to sit and focus and learn as much as we're asking these kindergartners to learn. I know that that has something to do with it, but I also know that in my classroom we have lots of time to move and to do those sorts of things, and I'm still seeing some of those attention issues. So I'm not sure what causes them, but it certainly could be a part of it.
Well, let's have some fun with that and go back 23 years. Well, now, first of all, what do you see as the difference in children and in classrooms over the past 20 years? How have we changed?
I think attention is the one thing that I'm noticing more than anything with kids, that they can't sustain, they can't, stay on task and use their mind to the extent that we need them to use it. And that's probably the main thing that I've noticed the difference in. We've certainly had a lot of changes in curriculum over the years and kind of that pendulum that swings back and forth. But I think more than anything, it's the kids and some of the special issues that they're coming to me with that make it more challenging than it was 20 years ago.
So when you say the special issues, have the conditions of children changed over the past 23 years?
Possibly. Certainly the conditions that they're arriving to me with, I just see more things going on in their lives, more issues that they're struggling with in order to be successful.
And going back, let's say 24 years when you were studying to be a teacher, and then actually becoming a teacher, was there a gap, the perception between what you expected going into teaching and the reality of the classroom every day?
You know, I always knew that teaching was going to be a hard job, and I was actually excited about that, the challenge of it, and knowing that I could do it and I could do anything, and I went into teaching kind of with that idea. And what I found out is that your teaching program, my credential program, didn't necessarily provide me with all of the opportunities to understand exactly what that classroom was going to be like. When I walked in, I knew one way to work with all 25 of those kids. And then when you get in the classroom, it's entirely different because every one of those kids is different and every one of those kids has unique needs. And so that was the part that I realized you never really understand what it's like to be a teacher until you're plopped down into that classroom and they say, okay, teach. At that point you start to realize, wow, this really is hard. And it is, but it's also super rewarding. And I don't think I ever realized how rewarding it was going to be too. The kids, just when they get something after you've spent so many months trying to make it so that they understand something, it's just really amazingly rewarding.
Well, you know, parent involvement has always been considered vital to children's education, and your superintendent has said that, and I'm quoting, "You're the kind of teacher who effectively engages all families in the pursuit of student success." What techniques do you use to get parents involved and engaged?
I think it's really important because, you know, there's a lot that these kids have to learn, and I can't do it alone. And so I really need that team effort on behalf of the families. And so I work really hard to make sure that parents feel included, that they know what's happening in the class. I do that by sending out a newsletter every week and kind of let them know the things that are happening in the classroom that week that they can be thinking about or talking with their kids about at home. And I work really hard also to make sure that I communicate with families as well. And being bilingual helps a lot with that because I can communicate with all of my families and make sure that every one of those families knows what they can do to help their kids be successful.
And I know you're a lifelong learner, and I also know that you like to link your learning in the community back to the classroom. What are there particularly inspiring or influential learning experiences that you've had that have positively impacted your teaching?
I think that I probably learn the most from the kids, believe it or not, that I'm always learning, from them in terms of, best strategies, that those are strategies that you come by because you've tried them with kids and they've worked. And so I learn a lot from them. I've been to some amazing workshops over the years, and the best kinds are the ones where you come back and you're just so excited to try out those strategies with kids. And I've certainly had a couple of those. There was a Singapore math workshop that I went to over the summer one summer, and it completely changed the way I taught math. And it was really exciting, and to have that kind of thing where you realize, wow, this is how we should be doing it. I should have been doing it like this all along. So it was very exciting.
Well, we know that teachers impact students' lives every day, but I also know the reverse is often true, that students often have a tremendous impact on the lives of teachers. Have there been students who have touched you in a special way?
Yeah, there's so many students, and in 23 years, gosh, I can't even imagine how many kids have walked through my door, and I have so many fond memories of so many of them, and wonder a lot, kind of, what has happened to them.
Can you share one?
Yeah, well, I was teaching in Petaluma, and it was nice when I was there because my kids would go through my class, but they were still in the community, and I would run into them and see how they were doing. And so when we moved to the Santa Barbara County, I realized, boy, I wasn't going to have those opportunities anymore. And I was really missing the opportunity of connecting with older students and seeing how they were doing and how their life had turned out. And we'd been living down here for a couple of years. And I was watching the news one night, and sure enough, there was one of my old students on KSBY who turned up as a reporter. And I, did a double take and thought, wait, is that my old student? And couldn't be, but sure enough, it was. So it's amazing to know that, you've had an impact on their lives. That child was an amazing child, and she's, doing very well today. And it doesn't have much to do with me, but I had, a little bit of an impact on her life, and that's exciting to see.
So what's the best part of being a teacher?
Oh, the kids. It's absolutely the kids, always. Yeah. And just what you get from them and watching them, be successful and grow up and use those strategies that you've worked so hard with them on. It's amazing.
And what's the most challenging part?
Same answer.
The kids.
The kids. Yeah. It is, yeah. Just really, figuring them all out, because there is no right or wrong answer that I can use year after year. Every single year, every hour of my day is different, because I'm constantly trying to figure out what's going to help Johnny be successful, and that changes all the time. And so that's the most challenging part. It's not bad. It's just challenging.
And what advice would you give to new teachers?
I would tell them to be excited and to be open and to be ready for the work that they were going to have to put into a classroom. But I would also want them to know that they chose such an amazing profession where they're going to impact so many lives in their years, and although it's difficult at times, it really is worth it.
So how do you find balance? I know you're very intense. Your work seems to be your life, a good part of it. What do you do to find balance, to relax and unwind?
Yeah, there's not a lot of relaxing. But I spend a lot of time with my family. I love being with them, and they kind of recharge me and make it possible for me to do all the things I do. I really, really love to spend time in my classroom and to develop the kinds of things that I'm doing with my students. So it's kind of a rewarding time too.
So mentoring, have you had a lot of mentors along the way?
I have, yeah. I've had several when I lived in Petaluma, and several that I've mentored since I've come here as well. And that's a tremendous opportunity, because I feel like while I think and hope that I'm helping my mentors, I think that they help me a lot too, in terms of opening my eyes to some new strategies and new ways of thinking and doing things. So it's exciting, I hope, for both of us.
And when you mentor other teachers, what approach do you take?
To make sure that they feel like it's okay to make mistakes. Kind of the same strategies I would use with my own students, making sure that they understand that you have to take risks and see what works, and sometimes it doesn't work, and that's okay, because you've learned and now you're not going to do that again next time. But just making sure that they understand that this is a tough job and it's not always easy, and that's okay. It's still something you should be doing.
And as a classroom teacher, as you look over the educational landscape in California, what are the big issues that you see?
My biggest issue right now is being very worried on behalf of our nation's children, and worried that kind of we're going to swing back in a direction that I don't necessarily think we should swing back in. And the most important part of that is we just swung one way. And so I'm very concerned that children who kind of changed the way they were doing things in their classroom are now going to be in a position of going back. And I have some fears about what that's going to do for kids and their learning.
So if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about education, what would it be?
I think I would take policymakers out of it. I would
and
let teachers teach. Yeah, I would. Yeah. I think it's really important. I think that teachers make decisions based on what's best for children, and policymakers don't always. And I think that if we would just let teachers make the decisions that they think are important, that we would see a real turnaround in education.
So you're very successful as a teacher. You're very passionate about what you do, but success means different things to different people. How do you define success? What standard do you hold yourself to?
I think I hold myself to my kids. If my kids and my students in my classroom are successful and are making progress, every single one of them, then I know I'm doing the right thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every child is meeting standards, but it does mean that every child is learning. So I get them where I get them, and I'm going to try to take them as far along that line and course as I can, get them as close to meeting their standards as possible. But for me, what I feel like my job is to make sure every child learns.
And we're just about out of time, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to send very brief messages to targeted audiences. If you could send a brief message to students, what would it be?
Keep taking risks and keep trying, and I just have so much respect for kids and the kind of things that they do in the classroom and what we're expecting them to do, and to keep doing it because the sky's the limit.
And how about to their parents?
I'd want their parents to know that that they can trust me and that I love their kids and I enjoy working with them, but also that I need them on my team in order for their kids to make the kind of progress they're going to need to make in school.
And how about your colleagues, your fellow teachers?
I'd like to tell them they're rock stars, that I think they're amazing, and that I see all the work and all the hours and time that they put into their classrooms and those students, and I want to personally thank them because they're amazing people.
And finally, to the community at large?
I'd want them to think very carefully about what's happening in our world right now, and maybe being able to speak about how important it is for their children. These kids are our future, and I think that we have to be very careful about some of the policies that are changing or things like that. So I would hope that the community would see that and take a stand.
Thank you, and thank you for being an advocate for kids, Carrie. We appreciate all you do. That's a perfect note to end on. Your caring, your compassion, your commitment, your skill, your tenaciousness, your love of children. It all shines through. So thank you for all you do for our children. You truly make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm Bill Cirone, thanking you for joining us and signing off for this edition of Talking with Teachers. Teachers like Carrie Padfield, who bring to life the vital message: learn today, lead tomorrow, public schools work.